Allison, we had to reset the equation to create something that would be sustainable for the long haul. We had said back in September we would open our schools, biggest school system in the country. Most cities weren't opening schools at all. We did. But we also said we'd have really strict standards. And I said if we hit to 3% positivity, that would be the point where we'd have to do something different. Now we have a different approach. We're adding a lot more testing, weekly testing in every school. Kids will have to have a testing consent form to come to school. This is going to allow us to get back up with our school system next Monday.
So they're opening up schools in NYC, at least at the lower school level, at the, I think, going up to 8th grade or so. But let's bring in somebody who really knows exactly what's happening. We talk about the fight to get our schools reopened, not just in NYC, but it's also a nationwide problem. Joe Borelli is with us now. He is a member of the New York City Council. He's also just a conservative man about town you'll see on various channels and radio shows giving his commentary. Joe, great to have you back.
Thank you for having me, as always. Appreciate it.
Tell us what's going on here with schools. Let's just start with the de Blasio announcement. So they're kind of opening schools finally. I guess, did they realize that the evidence showed that young children in particular were at no risk, and so this was crazy? What's going on?
It's funny to think, de Blasio and Fauci have now come around to the Borelli position, which is the consensus within the science community, the medical community, and in journals and other studies, that schools are relatively safe. They're no more dangerous than the communities which they're housed in. So if there's a spike in the community, there might be a spike in schools. But I am glad to hear the mayor has decided to reopen schools. It is a good thing. It's the right direction. There's no doubt about that. I think our lawsuit and our impending hearing on December 3rd probably played a role. When the science is on our side and the law is on our side, it would have been tough for them to defend their policy. But it's good. It's going to be K through 5 and then K through 8, and then hopefully the high school kids will get back in, which is a reasonable thing to do. It's what actually a lot of other school districts with more aggressive, superintendents have done. So I'm not opposed to the method in which they're doing it. And they're going to get the special needs kids back in 5 days a week as soon as possible, which is also really a good step. So, this is one of the days that maybe I won't dunk on Mayor de Blasio and just be thankful that he's finally come around to this position.
There never should have been this school shut down, though. And I think you noted that Dr. Fauci, for example, was unwilling to look at the obvious data as that was clear even in the summertime, and say there's no reason for these schools to be shut down. And, this is playing out in other places across the country as well. And I just want to ask, where are the teachers' unions on all of this? How has de Blasio been able to maneuver with them so that they're not all threatening to strike or anything else?
I think the rubber just met the road, and they were all exposed for sort of just this unscientific approach. I mean, the carpet was swept away from under them. The thing is, we can blame teachers' unions, and that's fine. But almost every teachers' union in the country, almost every municipal union in the country was sort of fighting for, their members to get the least amount of exposure. It really was, though, only Bill de Blasio who just completely caved and collapsed into their every demand and said, you know what, you're right, we don't really have to go back to school. So, it's beyond just the teachers' union, although they are certainly to blame. We oftentimes expect that our leaders will have a little bit of a backbone. And finally, de Blasio found his, and he, from what I'm hearing, he just sort of put his foot down and said, we're actually going to open up on this day.
Speaking of Joe Borelli, he is a city councilman here in New York. Joe, some very troubling statistics coming out over the Thanksgiving weekend. We had Black Friday happening, and while we do have this whole family and holiday component, there's the commercial aspect, right? There's how our businesses that many cases rely on a huge chunk of their sales coming from this period till the end of the year. The statistics that I saw said that in New York and New Jersey, as many or as high as a third of small businesses have closed.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the statistic that seems to be matching what you could kind of see on the street. When we came out of our initial lockdown, I mean, a lot of people, you could tell, very easily that some businesses didn't pull up the iron gates. And the statistic, I think, proves that. Whether you're in New York State, whether you're in New Jersey, and any other state that faced a significantly long lockdown, I think that's probably the accurate number. And juxtapose that to states. I mean, every state had some form of restriction, some form of lockdown, some form of regulation. But juxtapose what New York and New Jersey and Michigan and California did as compared to what other states did, I mean, namely Florida, where they delayed shutting down until it was necessary and then acted with urgency and deliberate purpose in reopening, right? Almost as though the same purpose they found in locking down was what they put into reopening. Those states are not seeing the same type of business shutdowns as us. And when you play this out in the long term, it doesn't bode well for New York. We have an extremely expensive government. We have extremely expensive state government and city government. And that relies on small businesses and large business to be rocking and rolling. Bill de Blasio actually didn't raise taxes, in any significant amount in New York City. The budget expansion that happened under him was allowed to happen because of the commercial boom that New York City was facing in terms of businesses wanting to come here, tourists wanting to come here, and mom and pops thriving all over New York City. So, I mean, that's just the reality. Now that that has been taken away, we're going to see a lot of financial problems for the city and state. Although Biden may bail us out, right? I mean, I suppose that's an option.
Well, yeah. We're speaking to Joe Borelli, New York City Councilman. Joe, what do you think should happen here going forward? I mean, I know there's at some level there's the vaccine and the timeline for that is going to affect one way or the other how rapidly we reopen and the extent of it. But do you think that New York City, I mean, given Cuomo and de Blasio's mindset, is still likely to go into a kind of COVID hibernation mode or over the wintertime? Or do you think that once this vaccine, which is supposed to be distributed in a matter of weeks, starts getting distributed, they may be a little bit less draconian?
Yeah, I would hope so. But the governor has begun to act more erratically as the weeks gone by, and he's someone that even threw shade on the idea of people getting the vaccine as long as Trump was the president. That's insane. That's actually really, really troubling. And there is a role for government here. I mean, the hospital beds are approaching capacity. I mean, that's not a rumor. That's happening where I am on Staten Island. And there is a role for government in opening up some new facilities and making sure beds are available for people at hospitals that aren't going for COVID and doing their regular type of procedures. That's where government should be. Throwing shade on a vaccine and acting erratically, banning people from gathering on Thanksgiving, it just really undermines this weird idea that Americans have that Governor Cuomo is this competent hero in the new COVID world.
And it's amazing that here we are seeing that schools never should have been closed. Maybe that's an indicator. The people that were saying they were following the science, let's close the schools in the fall, they were wrong to do that. Maybe they're wrong about other things, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the science, right? If a school has a whole bunch of positive cases from kids, close that particular school or that particular classroom briefly, but don't do a system-wide shutdown. That's kind of the consensus everywhere you look. We also have a contact tracing core in New York City. We were told that we needed this tracing core. Once we had it, we'd be able to open and track all our cases and solve the mystery of where COVID comes from. Not only did the contact tracing people say that schools weren't the problem, but they also couldn't provide evidence that there was links to restaurants or bars or nightclubs or salon. By the way, I mean, I'm not an irrational person. If the contact tracing core said, hey, we linked a dozen cases to a restaurant and the restaurant wasn't following basic protocols, I'd be all for, shutting that place down or violating them. But they have no evidence to support so much of this. And yet the knee-jerk reaction is only and always to lock things down. It's not the right move. It's not what the health departments of a lot of other states are doing. It's not what the health departments of a lot of countries are doing. I mean, we saw kind of disparate approaches cases in France and Spain recently with their second wave in their largest wave. And both countries have receded about 50 or 60% off their height of new cases. And yet France went down into a very hard lockdown. Spain went into a very soft lockdown. So there isn't consensus and clear evidence of what we should be doing. So the knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be to bankrupt mom and pop businesses, especially from, and I'm sorry to rant, but this guy just ramps me up. This is a guy who never missed a paycheck. He never had to max out his own credit cards. He never had to dip into his kid's college fund. He sits in a mansion that we pay for with servants and cooks and cleaners and security and barks orders of which counties and towns and neighborhoods have to shut down. It's not fair to those people, and people are getting sick of it.
Joe Borelli, everybody, New York City Councilman. Joe, always keeping it real, dropping truth bombs. Appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.